at the international desk. Iraqi troops fight against the last pockets of ISIS resistance in Mosul. Questions surround a meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and a Russian lawyer, and a camper awakes to a bear attacking him. Hello and welcome. I'm Lynda Kinkade. Iraqis are celebrating a win 3 years in the making as Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi declares a great victory in Mosul. He says the northern city is liberated, but fighting is still ongoing in pockets of the city where ISIS declared its caliphate. Our Nick Paton-Walsh has the latest from the old city of Mosul, where victory is in sight for Iraqi forces.
This is the edge of the old city of Mosul, where the most intense fighting against ISIS has been, and where we saw this morning a tiny pocket of ISIS fighters is still holding out. That appears to have delayed Haider al-Abadi, the Iraqi Prime Minister, from getting on a stage and declaring finally, the fight for Mosul over. Instead, he's said he's come here to announce it. He's been touring the streets we've seen. He's been meeting the Christians today to make them feel more relaxed, and he's appealing people to go back to their jobs. But the fighting is still going on. Now, if you travel about 2 kilometres, about 1.5 miles down that way, you will see the river that runs through the heart of Mosul. That is the back end of ISIS territory. There are about a dozen houses or so we saw today where ISIS are still holding out. We saw ISIS fighters, we thought, coming out of the rubble, surrendering themselves. We actually, at the building we were in, was shaken by an airstrike delivered by the United States, and you can see some of the black smoke distant on the horizon there. They're pounding those remaining positions that ISIS have in there, because it's literally a matter of hours, they think, until they can declare that area fully cleared. But booby traps are still around, and I have to say, the devastation behind me here is absolutely staggering. Pretty much every street you go down has got a vehicle, a car flipped, pancaked, torn to shreds. They've bulldozed everything to the side, but we've seen civilians going through the rubble here early today, even a group of people visiting the remains of the Al-Nuri Mosque that was once so sacred to ISIS, but actually they destroyed themselves. But there's nothing really to sustain life in here, and it will be a simple job of trying to rebuild, but not a simple job. Haider al-Abadi has a massive task ahead of bridging the divide between the Sunnis, the ethnic group that ruled under Saddam Hussein as a minority, and the Shia, who he's part of and are now in charge of the army and government mostly. It's been a kind of sectarian war to some degree. Fighting will still continue against ISIS in the other towns they have, but this is pretty much their symbolic death blow to some degree here. The city that they held that was always the biggest, and now the one that they're literally down to a matter of houses in. A momentous day for Iraq.
Nick Paton-Walsh reporting there. Well, let's talk more about this. CNN Global Affairs analyst and former US Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken joins me now from Washington. Good to have you with us, Tony. This
Thanks, Linda.
Was the very city where ISIS declared its caliphate 3 years ago. Apart from some small pockets of resistance, this city is essentially back in the hands of Iraqis. When you look at the overall war against ISIS, how big a blow is this?
It's a big moment. It's a significant moment for a couple of reasons. First, as ISIS has no territory to control in Iraq, that means there's no place for foreign fighters to go. It doesn't have resources to exploit like oil. But maybe most important of all, its entire narrative that it's building an actual state, that's now in tatters. And that means that its brand around the world is going to start to decline. So this is a big moment, but the real question is, what comes next? How do we ensure that the Islamic State, once defeated militarily, stays defeated?
Well, that is the big question. Like, when ISIS has lost so much territory, how is this going to affect that terror network's ability to recruit?
Well, it's going to make a difference because, again, the brand is in decline, and that means it will be less attractive for people to sign up. But here's the problem in Iraq itself. Unless we can deal with the underlying politics, unless we can give, for example, disaffected Sunnis, there are about 25 million of them living between Baghdad and Damascus, the belief that the state will look out for their interests and not persecute them, then the conditions will still be there for a Daesh 2.0, an Islamic State 2.0 to rise and to recruit new people. So a lot of this is about how do you get the politics right going forward. I think there's one way to do that, and that's basically decentralization, or what we'd call federalism here in the United States, making sure that people at the local level have the resources and the responsibility to run their own lives. That can give every group in Iraq confidence that it should stick with Iraq and not get back into these sectarian conflicts that risk tearing the country apart.
Yeah, that is absolutely crucial. The other thing that's going to happen is rebuilding the city. That battle has gone on for almost 9 months. This is going to be a big battle coming up to rebuild that city, right?
Yeah, it's a tremendous, tremendous challenge, and we've seen the images. The city and other cities in Iraq have been devastated. The good news here is this. The Obama administration put in place a process. First, we built a coalition with now 68 countries in it. And with the United Nations, we raised money, resources, to start to get in and rebuild liberated cities, to secure them, to get services running again, to get basic security in place, governance in place. And that allows people to come home and start to regain their lives. But it's a massive undertaking. It's going to require more resources, and it's going to require time.
So, Tony, what does this win in Mosul mean for the battle in Raqqa in Syria? What can we take away from this victory?
Well, I think we've seen that the strategy that the Obama administration put in place, which is empowering local forces, but with heavy support from the international coalition, can work. And it succeeded in Iraq. We're seeing its success in Syria. But that said, Syria is even more difficult because once Raqqa is liberated, and it will be, getting the services, getting the governance, getting the basic security in place is much more difficult because you've got a civil war that's still going on throughout Syria. So as challenging as Iraq is, Syria is going to be even more difficult.
Certainly many more competing interests there. Tony Blinken, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for your analysis.
Thanks, Lynda.